Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you guys are joining us today. We will wait just a few more seconds to give everyone the chance to log on. But while we wait, I just want to mention a few resources for you to check out after this interview. We have a very special webinar today with a special guests, obviously. We also have many other webinars that might be interesting for you. I would highly recommend checking out our website, www.robotel.com, and take a look at the webinar replays you can watch there. I also recommend our blog.robotel.com. We have lots of great articles about language teaching, technology, language labs, digital curricula for language teaching and learning, and so much more. So I think everyone is here. So let's get started. I am really excited to host this interview today on behalf of Robotel. My name is Hannah, and we here at Robotel believe in transforming how languages are taught by combining a digital language teaching platform with educational content. We want to provide students enriched opportunities to practice speaking, gain confidence, and improve fluency in all language skills. That's why I'm so excited to have Candice here with me today. Candice Bland is a former language teacher, administrator, and now one of our product experts here at Robotel. She has taught Spanish for many, many years, and she has agreed to share her insights with all of you today. She used Robotel's SmartClass language lab and digital platform in her own classroom, and she also worked as an administrator with schools and other teachers that used our products and curricula. So thank you so much for joining me today, Candice.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
This is a great opportunity for all of you to learn a little bit more about a teacher's perspective on SmartClass by Robotel. I'm going to share my screen with you. We have a little PowerPoint that, let's see, here we go. Okay.
Great.
Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Awesome. So we have a teacher's perspective on SmartClass by Robotel, our interview with Candice. We're going to be talking about language labs in foreign language classrooms, teaching with technology, funding and grants, digital language curricula, motivating students, and helping students succeed in the foreign language. So Candice, thank you again so much. I'm going to dive right in with our first question here, and that is, what made you look for a language lab solution for your classroom?
So luckily, the school district that I was in at the time had a language lab. It was very antiquated. It was very outdated. It had cassette tapes. The students went down. There wasn't really much learning going on. And so the district asked me to take a look at other options, or we were going to lose the lab. So I went on a wild goose chase trying to look for the viable option for a digital language lab that would be easy for my colleagues to leverage and also state of the art, that it was the most up to date. I came across Robotel at the time, really liked what I saw. And we're talking back in the year 2008 or so a long time ago. And we purchased the language lab through budget funds, and they had allocated funds for it. So that was my major motivation, but also because I was a language lab coordinator at the university. That was a semester job that I had, like a work study type job. And I just saw how much a language and using technology could definitely impact a student's ability to acquire a second language. So that was one of the main reasons why I did accept the job at this district, because they did boast about the fact that they had a language lab. But then it was very, very, very old and outdated with cassette tapes. So when given the opportunity to update it, I luckily came across Robotel, and it made the world of difference.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's very, very important that teachers know and understand that. Let's see. I have a second question for you right away, and that is, how did SmartClass change the way your students learned? So what was that like for your students once you started teaching with SmartClass and their language lab?
So it really allowed students to, lower their affective filter. They weren't as shy to produce the language because I could simulate these great scenarios outside of the classroom. We were in the language lab, and they honestly sat there and were more motivated to speak and produce the language just by the activities that I was able to create on the hub, which is the learning platform and instructional platform, coupled with the live, which is the language lab software. The language lab software works one-on-one with the hub. You can have just the hub by itself, or you could have the language lab by itself, or you can work two of them together. I was lucky enough to have them both together, which was amazing. And what I would do is I would bring the students to the language lab. Now we have the option at Robotel to have the language lab in your classroom. So either way, and I would launch a live activity where I would pair students up randomly sometimes. Sometimes I would force pairings, and I knew which kid I wanted to work with which student, depending on their language ability, maybe individualizing instruction, making sure that I had high students with high students, medium students with medium students, and those students that had a lot of room for growth with those students that had a lot of room for growth. And I would create different activities for each level so that I knew that students were at their level +1. So the platform allowed me to really individualize instruction for the students because I could really create 3 different versions of the same activity. And obviously those were some activities that I created. I could put my picture in there, which students always loved. That's me and my best friend. That's me and my daughter in Spain. And the great thing is that I could be testing the students on the present tense, but I could make 3 different variations of that type of an assignment and that structure in the Spanish language, or even when I did my ESL students. And I could really do some homogeneous groupings where the students were homogeneously grouped, high, medium, and low, or heterogeneous grouping where I had native speakers with non-natives in my Spanish class, or I had, higher students with lower students with medium leveled students. So it really allowed for me to master the idea of teaching the students at their level +1, but proving that I could really individualize for all the student needs. Because we know in a language classroom, there are all differing levels of language abilities. Sometimes you have native speakers, sometimes you have students that are super uberly motivated. Then you have the opposite end of the spectrum. You have those students who really don't want to be there. They're just taking it for the requirement. And so you have to really meet their students at their level. And this is a really huge trick for language teachers because most students have to take language as a requirement. Some want to be there, some don't want to be there. And so to deliver instruction with one type of an activity, it's really not meeting all their needs or all their interests. So that's one way my students' learning was changed. I was really able to cater each activity and group students well so that they all felt that they were in command of their learning. So, leveraging technology allows you to do that. When you're one person in a classroom versus 30 people, and you've got to try to cater to all 30 people, this is the magic that a teacher can do, but it's exhausting. So this allowed me to really work that magic very easily. So it was really nice. And my students felt, that they were actually producing the language, speaking the language. They were grappling with activities, grappling with topics. And all the while I could listen and hear and be everywhere in the classroom. And they knew that. So that also changed their learning. They knew Ms. Bland could be listening at any given moment in time. So they really stayed on task. Because with the live software, you're able to monitor students and they don't really know that you're even listening in. So you could really hear that academic language and that academic talk and catch students doing the right thing. So that was really neat too.
I love that you refer to teachers as magicians and they're working their magic. Like I agree, not just because I'm a language teacher myself, but I think kudos to all those language teachers out there that are doing this still every day, day after day, that care and that really want to get their students to that next level.
Sure.
You already kind of like talked a little bit about this, but how did SmartClass change the way you taught?
Right.
So you mentioned a few things, but maybe just summarize or maybe want to add something to that.
So on top of what I just mentioned, I'm the type of person that goes and I travel a lot, like a lot of world language teachers do. We are passionate about going and keeping up our own language skills. So I traveled a lot to South America, Central America, the Caribbean. I traveled extensively throughout Europe and specifically in Spain. And I would bring back all this amazing realia, whether it was a menu, a map, a downtown map of, wherever I was walking around. If I was able to attend a conference when I was abroad, I would get PDFs and I would do different type of broadcasts and recordings and videotape plazas and flamenco dances and anything I could bring back. So I had all this great stuff that like propaganda that I brought back from these countries. And I did not have a vehicle by which to deliver this instruction other than me saving it to my stick drive, hoping that it would open up on my computer, broadcasting it somehow with some type of projector. So it was risky, but I really wanted to bring what I love so much about the culture and the language into my classroom, that students would be inspired and want to travel and go there themselves. And so one of the ways that it allowed me to really transform the way that I taught was I could digitize all of these materials, save them in a beautiful platform that allowed me to create a reading activity, a writing activity, a speaking activity, a listening activity for all this great real footage that I brought back from these countries. I could take a picture of a menu that I brought back from Spain and load it into our system and create a speaking activity about it, or a writing activity, or a listening activity that could either be autonomous that students completed individually, or something that I launched during a live session and I had students talk about what it is that they saw, whatever that realia or visual was. I love, love, love podcasts. So I remember, a whole batch of podcasts when I was in España, in Spain, and brought them back. I loaded it into the system and I created all these activities just based off the podcast, which were really nice. Transcriptions, fill in the blanks, matching, word order, whatever would have you, true and false. And so I really felt that I was exposing the students to the authentic language use. And it wasn't just this isolated activity that I was doing in a classroom. A lot of times, another magic trick that we play as world language teachers that we try to simulate. We try to really bring what is a real life application of the present subjunctive when you're trying to speak in the Spanish language. And so instead of teaching it in isolation, it was always contextualized, and I could contextualize everything. And this is like a real trick of language acquisitions, that you want it to be contextualized. You don't want it to be standing alone. So I could textualize the present subjunctive because I got some type of really cool visual off the side of a building that I took a picture of, and the use of the present subjunctive. It might have been an announcement or some type of advertisement. And I could get the students to take a look at this, viewing visual and create an activity that would go along with it, whether it was like a reaction. I asked them a question. I asked them to speak about what this was. I asked them to write about it, or maybe make their own type of an announcement or their own type of advertisement. So again, this platform allowed me to archive and digitize everything, organize it really nicely, because that's another thing. I had a gazillion folders for every single level that I taught, and I knew where everything was, but this keeps it in a really nice, organized fashion. And it also allowed me to share and collaborate. And I was able to now, because my stuff was digitized, my colleagues were able to take my great material and also use it in their classrooms as I could use theirs, and vice versa. So that was really neat too.
So, not to sound negative, but it sounds like this was a lot of work.
It was.
If you had
Teachers
to
are
do this
classes, world language teachers, we will do da 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 da. We'll sit there. I was in the language lab
yeah.
for hours and hours and hours doing this. So yeah, it was a lot of work. But hey, if a teacher looks at the amount of work they do and actually think they're going to get any type of restitution for it, like, you need a different job, because we're workhorses. Teachers are just, and I feel like world language teachers, we are even over the top because we're doing it in another language. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. No, I would totally agree. And you will never get to a point where you just don't do something. So you're always investing time. But specifically, why should teachers invest time and energy in using technology? And specifically like a digital language lab in their daily teaching? Like, would you be able to say anything about that?
This is how kids learn. This is definitely brings our material to life for them. We are the biggest actors and actresses in front of the classroom, and we can spin on our head until the cows come home. But Kids are a screen. They like to be on a screen. They like to touch things. They like to move things around. They like to see little video clips. They're YouTubers. This is where their brains are really going for the information. And so why not make that information our information, the way that they learn? And so to digitize and use technology and leverage technology, it's not the end all be all. Obviously, we are never going to ever be able to, I would imagine, really simulate that interpersonal dyadic communication. However, our platform with the artificial intelligence, with the ability to have students listen to how they sound, reflect and repeat and mimic how they sound. That productive language where that gets those kids over that hump of anxiousness of you learning the second language, because if you're a second language learner like I am, you have to have this level of being okay with committing an error and being okay with the way that you sound in another language and listening to that. And so this is one of the keys to language teaching. And in a traditional classroom, that gets lost. There's always going to be a couple of those students who just sort of fade to the background. They're able to scoot under the radar and not really have to do that language production. And the teacher, again, it's 1 usually versus 30, especially in language classrooms. It's very easy that a kid could get by without having to really produce as much language as a teacher would want. However, if you're able to leverage technology, this would in like almost force an inclusive classroom that all students would have to be producing the language and would have their own little space to do it, so that when you did have an activity where students were interpersonally speaking in the classroom, it actually builds that skill up in them, so that when they are in the natural classroom and you're expecting them to do language production, they have that muscle memory in their usher, in their mouths, from having speaking in the language lab or using the language lab technology, that they are able to feel a little bit more confident in wanting to produce the language. So I felt like when I used this technology, students in my classroom were really producing the language. There was nothing better of a feeling than students walking out of the AP exam or the seal of biliteracy, when I administered those exams to the students, or the students took those exams for me, and they walked out and they said to me, "Wow, that was so much easier than your class, Miss Bland. Like, everything and all the activities that you did really, truly prepped me to be able to feel okay with that type of a test." And my students did really well on the AP exam. They all got the seal of biliteracy, the intermediate mid level. They were averaging a 4 to a 4.5 on the AP assessment, because we were simulating that type of language production throughout the year, both in the language lab, and then I would bring it into the classroom. But I could really monitor how each student was at what level of language production, because you really want that productive language, that speaking and that writing. And it really just made it easier for me to monitor how they were writing and grading their writing, because that is a very long process to have students write and you grade them in persuasive essays, and them understanding the orthography in another language. Are they spelling things correctly? Do they understand how to recaer las tildes? Do they understand how to put the accents on there? Do they understand, that the PH in English is an F in Spanish, and I could really pinpoint areas of, I need to do some more instruction on this in the classroom, some, traditional instruction, because I could tell by the activities that I assigned to them, it actually geared and tweaked if I needed to reteach or if I needed to enrich. So it's technology at this point in the year 2022, we really need to push it forward and leverage it, so that it's never going to replace what we are, but it can definitely heighten what we can do with our students.
And so much of test taking really is, or your success is based on like knowing the environment and knowing how to take a test. Not even like students might be, I experienced that with my own students. They might know all of the answers, but they have never had headphones on. They've never spoken into a microphone. They've never done any of those like oh my gosh, everybody's around me, like this simultaneously testing and all that.
And clearly speak into a headset.
Yes.
My ESL students who had to sit for the WIDA access test, you know, they were able to simulate that situation, at a very young age. I had them, even my fourth graders, it wasn't just up through my high school level. My fourth graders were sitting there and practicing for the assessment. And that allowed, because the speaking part of that assessment has a lot of criticism. The students usually do not perform well on that part, even though they can speak to you with more than just Bix and Calp. They are using more of the Calp in the classroom. And, when they go to sit for this test and it's that one shot, that one snapshot, they might not have ever practiced how to speak into a microphone, how to project their voice. A lot of times, especially English language learners, they're very low talkers because they don't want people to hear their accents. They feel very shy about that. So I was able to mitigate that fear, that anxiety, that discomfort by having them go into the language lab or just running a hub activity in the classroom where they were speaking into the headsets and they were listening to themselves, and then they were hearing and getting used to themselves pronouncing the English language. And it gave them this level of L2 confidence that when it came time for them to sit there and take the access test and do the speaking part, it was like a no-brainer, And so I feel like that's part of a teacher's frustration, is that they do all of this amazing work all year long. They know what their students' abilities are, but then it comes time for the test, and then the students flop, or there's some type of testing condition that the students just are not used to. And again, knowing the format of the test is 90% of the battle, And so, that was always something that I felt was so unfair for language learners, whether it was second language learners of Spanish, German, French, or any other language, or my English language learners. This technology and leveraging this technology, that's how they're assessed. This is how we prove, unfortunately, all the hard work and, sleepless nights that we are upgrading papers and creating activities. This is how we prove our worth, what we were able to approve, what we were able to accomplish with the students. And it's a snapshot. It's a one-time deal, but nonetheless, it is what it is. That's just the way of the world of education, especially here in the United States. And so to have technology like this allowed me to properly have my students display everything that they had learned with me. So it was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Welcome.
The next question is a big one, and we get that question all the time. You were successful as a teacher to find funding and grants to implement Robotel's SmartClass language lab in your schools. You also were an administrator in charge of deciding who gets what grants and funds for what. So I think a lot of our followers are really interested in how did you find financing and grants to pay for the Smart Class Language Lab?
Yeah. So of course, world language is always on the chopping block. We never have the biggest budget in the entire building because ELA gets the budget, math gets the budget, science gets the budget, even physical education gets the budget. World language is just always that afterthought, unfortunately, here in this country. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can really advocate for your department. You could take a look at some of the information that we have here, but we have Title IV. The Every Student Succeeds ATS Act was just, distributed out by the government, did allocate funds for world languages and for, language learning. And so, each district does have their own budget lines for languages. And I know a lot of times we have to buy textbooks, which are very expensive. One of the things that I really was able to advocate was because the affordability of Robotel. Robotel is extremely affordable. A lot of people, when I do a demonstration for them, then they're like, okay, well, what's the cost? All the time, that's what they want to get to. They want to, get right to the finish line. What's the cost? And when I tell them that the cost is X, they cannot believe it. They think it's just, what? Really? And I'm like, yes. And is it very affordable? So for world languages, in regards to the books become very antiquated in the textbooks and those sorts of things. And a lot of times teachers are using other materials anyway. And so I use textbook lines to purchase the subscriptions for the students. and both as an administrator as well as, when I advocated as a teacher. And, in lieu of having hard textbooks in the classroom, we had the platform and the content and the curriculum that we offer, because we offer Spanish curriculum, we offer German curriculum. We're about to release the French curriculum, which is really nice. So that was able to easily fit into the budget line, right? Because I rationalized it as being the course resource in the classroom. And then the other way for English language learners, it's Title III funds. Title III funds are to be allocated to even the playing field, to give the students the ability to really, truly excel while they're learning the English language. And so if we're talking about ESL students, Title III funds, I used the Title III funds out the wazoo to fund for the LTE, the Let's Talk English, that curriculum and platform. And also the idea of the assessments that are attached to both of those departments. So in regards to AP budgets and Sealed by Literacy, if your school district wants to, offer the Sealed by Literacy, have that as an accolade on their school report card or the AP scores, that's one of the things that a school report card is a district will be evaluated on how many students sit for the AP exam, what's the average score on the AP exam. So if you're a world language teacher and you really want to advocate for all the hard work that you do, you could really tie the features and functionality of the Robotel SmartClass platform and live to the direct correlation of student performance on the Sealed by Literacy or on AP assessments. When it comes to ESL students, if you're a WIDA state, which most states are, or whatever it is the major assessment that you use or that's used in your state to monitor the progress of English language learners, you can directly relate the results of your access testing, if you're a WIDA state and or any other state, relate those federal state mandated test results to the fact that you implemented the Robotel platform. And so you can break it down by domain on our platform. We have a beautiful, beautiful usage report, which really breaks it down, and you can target speaking, you can target reading, you can target writing, you can target pronunciation, you can target listening. So you can target all the language domains, you can target all 3 language modalities and presentational, interpretive, and I forget the other one, but because it's out of my mind, but you can target all of that stuff and really drive instruction so that when you are assigning activities throughout the year, you could take a look at last year's data, take a look at last year's test results for the Sealed by Literacy for a particular teacher, if you've given the Apple assessment, or for the access test, and take a look at their access scores and take a look at their domains to see which students need which activities to enrich which domains. And you could really, truly, at a very minutia level, drive instruction to rationalize why this platform is key to the success of your students' progress on state mandated tests.
You mentioned a lot of the data, so I want to just dive a little bit deeper into that. What is possible with the SmartClass Hub? So how does SmartClass allow teachers and students to monitor their progress and performance in the L2? Like you were talking about the listening, the speaking, you can get all that overview in the usage report. Would you care to elaborate a little bit further?
Yeah, so it's so neat. So our platform, we have built-in curriculum in Spanish, German, and in English, soon to be French. And so our activities are automatically categorized into listening, reading, writing, and speaking, or pronunciation. Or if the teacher wants to create their own activities, which is really, really neat, the teacher, if you see on this page right here to the right-hand side, you can see our activities are all coded there. The skill set is coded. But if the teacher wants to create their own activity, like you saw the picture of me and my daughter or me and my best friends, it also categorizes it into a specific domain. So when a teacher and student looks at the usage report, the student gets to see, oh, I'm doing really well in listening, but I need some more help in writing, just as the teacher would be able to see that. And so the students can start to advocate for themselves, especially those go-getter students who want to get that 5 on the AP exam, or who really want to get that seal of biliteracy. They can take a look at where their weak points are and ask the teacher, I'd like to have some more activities on writing, because I see that my writing is not as high as a percentage as my speaking and my listening, right? Or pronunciation. So this is the point in the educational career where you want to get a student to advocate for themselves. You want to get a student to monitor their own progress, which is really hard. That was one of the questions that I would ask as an administrator, and that administrators would ask me when as a teacher. How do you get students to monitor their own progress? And I'm like, well, I don't know. That they look at the grade portal? No. Grade portal is just one grade. They look at the grade and they keep on going. However, this gives them a percentage per domain so they could see what their strengths are, and they could see where their room of growth is. And also you could now use this as a teacher to say, okay, I have these 6 students who are doing fantastic in reading. They are averaging a 95% in reading. And I have these 6 students who are averaging only a 70 to 75% in reading. Let me make sure that when I do my grouping activities with the live, I'm going to group a heterogeneous grouping with these strong readers, with these not so strong readers, that maybe they can learn from each other. So again, teachers can really use this data analysis report to do a lot of justification of how they do groupings in class, heterogeneous, homogeneous. They could show the progress of students to their administrators in a very finite way. This data, which is always like the dirty data word, because that's like the big buzzword in education, it is important. Data is important. Unfortunately, it is something that we really, as teachers, we always kept track of in our own way, but this really makes it data that is realistic and relevant for world language and ESL teachers, because it's data made for our subject matter. Our subject matter is very unique because we look at the domains of language production, the productive skills, and language reception and the receptive skills. And what I love in that right-hand pane where it says skills, you have their productive skills and you have their receptive skills. And I think that's really neat for a teacher to have in their psyche when they're doing activities and creating activities. And it also, for a teacher, it gives you reflection, because I know I was heavy on writing. When I was a teacher, if you ink it, you think it. My Spanish high school teachers always said that to me, and I kept true to that. And so I gave a lot of writing activities, which of course was a lot of grading. So I knew that I shied away from maybe, listening activities, because for me to sit there and speak in the classroom and have them answer, without having my technology, I wanted them to be able to listen to something, rewind it, re-listen to it, or maybe they could only listen to it twice and that was it. And I didn't have that ability other than to just sort of have like a dictation in front of the classroom where everybody was listening in unison and everybody was trying to answer in unison. Whereas this type of platform allows students, especially those that have maybe individualized educational plans and they need to hear it multiple times, they need to see a script at the same time, whereas other students just need to hear it once and they can move on. So again, this allowed me to really, really, really maneuver how I instructed so that every student was catered to in the classroom.
You kind of already took away my next question. How does SmartClass support individualized instructional approaches? All good. We have 2 products. We have the Live and we have the Hub. And I think you spoke a lot about the Hub, about how you can duplicate activities. You can make sure that your students with IEPs have a specific set of activities that really support them and all those kind of things. Is there anything you want to add on to individualized instructional approaches?
I really love the idea when I was able to launch a Live, that if you go back to the other screen, like a teacher's able to really listen into the student. Like that allows you to listen to students where they don't know that you're listening, right? And I love that because it allowed me to get what I might have not taught right. That they had these questions that they were either too afraid to ask or didn't come up in the regular instruction in the traditional classroom, that I would jot down, be like, okay, they still have a foggy area here, right? So it really, really, really geared me to know what the student was thinking. So I got into their heads a little bit more, and they knew it, but they would forget that Ms. Bland was lurking and listening. And then I could tap into, and I could stop the class, blank their screens. I can, if it was like a common question that like more than 3 students had, I'd be like, okay, let's stop instruction right now. This is a teachable moment. I can isolate the teachable moment in real time, do some real quick teaching, real quick reiteration, boom, and then send them back off on their way, completing the activity. So it was really nice. I could also send them a quick message real quick, like, hey, you're doing a great job. Or like, you might want to think of it this one. This one's an orthographic changing verb, but I'm noticing you're forgetting that orthographic change. Remember Kargarzars? And they'd be like, oh, yeah. So that was really neat. And also I love the fact that when I paired students up, there were students that never talked to each other in the classroom before, and might have shied away. And they really like came alive, and they felt a little bit more confident maybe talking to a student that they weren't friends with. So it really allowed for that classroom environment to have more bonding and to know that everybody here is included. You're going to speak to everyone no matter what. I don't have to like awkwardly pick somebody up and like, no, you're going to partner with him. You're going to partner with, how that whole situation happens in the classroom when you launch partner grouping activities or collaborative activities. This one was just natural. I would boom, I'd hit a matrix. It would pair them up randomly, or I would select them. And the kids never knew who they were going to talk to, but they just knew they had to speak at that moment in time. So it was really cool.
Such a good life lesson too, because you don't always get to choose who you're going to work with later in life or who you're going to talk to, and it's always going to be a little bit awkward, so might as well get that out in like a safe classroom setting before you go out there in the world and use your second language or third language or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yep.
um I have a few more questions for you. So the next one is, how does SmartClass permit teachers to easily adjust instruction to meet the students at their level plus one?
And again, that was one of the things I just mentioned previously, like, is that the idea that I was able to listen into them and I could say,
Mhm.
okay, like 3 or 4 students have the same question. Let me do some reteaching because it would be good for the whole classroom. Also the ability to make different variations of the same activity so that I could launch that activity on the preterite tense or the simple past tense. But maybe for my native speakers, I put a lot more irregular verbs on it, or the common offender verbs that they always misspell, like hacer, they always want to put an S in. And then maybe for the students who have, specific educational needs, I could put in some notes for them that would help them, maybe the verb conjugations on the side, or give them extra time to complete it, or reset the activity for them. If they bomb it completely, I could say, hey, why don't you try this again, which is really nice. The other thing too that I haven't mentioned is that, the majority of activities are automatically graded. And so students get that automatic feedback that is so important for them, that for us teachers, again, we're magicians, and I would like race against myself. My students be like, Miss Bland, you're such a spaz. Why do you can get our quizzes back within the next day? I'm like, because I need you to know that all that work that you studied for was validated, and here's your grade. A lot of times students will complain like, oh, it takes my teacher 2 weeks to get their work back. And after that, it's out of sight, out of mind. Out of sight, out of mind. They're on to the next thing of memorizing and just like putting it in their head and leaving it. But with leveraging of technology, and especially technology like ours that auto grades and gives students automatic feedback on the spot, it allows for the teacher to see like, wow, these kids are masters at reflexive verbs, or these kids have no idea about double object pronouns. I thought I taught it, like, let's go back to the drawing board, So it allowed me as a teacher to really gauge like in real time, like, oh my gosh, they already know how to say or answer this specific question. If it was a anticipatory set and I wasn't sure if they had had exposure to how do you express time in Spanish, for example, like, how do you answer this question? Do you know that it changes from es la to son las, and when it does that? And so for me to really make little minor changes or just pivots in my instruction to say, okay, they have already mastered how to tell a time. Let me have them learn now the different parts of the day and the different more more flowery language, like, entre la semana, durante el fin de, and those words that were just like so more colloquial. So that relates to time as well. So again, when the individualization of instruction and pivoting my lessons, because of the fact that there was automatic grade back, that the students were graded and they got automatic feedback, it allowed me to easily, like I say, recalibrate and say, okay, wow, I can really go a little bit step higher, or They don't remember at all reflexive verbs. They don't get that. Let me go back to the basics, reteach a little bit, because we know what language is very culminating. And depending on their previous experience coming into your classroom, you might assume that they already know the present indicative, but they never learned a specific structure in the present indicative. And especially with the pandemic and all the gaps that the kids are coming in, they have gaps, but they also have gifts. We try to be positive. We need to be able to gauge, what do they know, what do they not know, and then how does that inform my instruction. And something like this with the technology really allows me to do it in real time. I can give an anticipatory set or a do now real quick in the beginning of the classroom outside of the language lab. It could just be on the hub. It grades it right there. I get the feedback right there. I see the data, and I was like, okay, these kids have mastered the verb to be in Spanish. Let me give them more. So that's what technology can do for a teacher in regards to recalibrating instruction.
Oh, absolutely. And I used it so much myself too. And I'm sure we have some people on here that have tried all of those things in their own classrooms as well. My last questions are questions that we get a lot at Robotel. So a lot of teachers always contact us with very specific questions, or they've attended a webinar or they've read a blog post, and then they come. And even though we've talked about assessment and how our live language lab can really support that, I just added those two questions at the end again, to make sure that we answer those and are able to help and support anybody that is interested in using SmartClass. So how does SmartClass facilitate multimodal assessment types for students?
Mhm. So you want students to be able to show you in their way, right, how they've acquired and mastered your instructional objective. This is the essence of how do you know if you got your point across to your students. And it should never be a one size fits all. We know all these cliche sayings that students shouldn't all have to produce the same type of product to show you that they've acquired and mastered your instructional objective. That's a lot of work to be able to have students hand in different materials and different ways of showing you. But if you have something like our platform, you can have a student do a listening activity if that's their strength. You can have a student do a writing activity if that's their strength, a speaking activity if that is their strength, a writing activity if that is their strength, on the same topic, such as talking about their daily routine, which is a topic that all language teachers have to teach. So, talking about their daily routine, you can have them pick the mode in which they would like to express how they would be able to talk about their daily routine. And they could easily do it on the platform. They could do it in a writing. If you created a writing activity for them, which could be automatically graded, you could create a pronunciation activity, which is automatically graded, which it would be the speaking activity. You could create a listening where they're listening to you that you've recorded about your daily routine, and they are answering true and false questions about whatever is your daily routine might be that you've created. And it's very simple, or you can use one of our pre-created activities, right? So these are all multimodal ways that a student can show you that they understand the daily activities, that they know the daily routine. They know how to say what they did first, then after, then last, and what they do every single morning, every single night, every single afternoon, whatever it is that your assessment was. And so, again, multimodal assessments are difficult because you have to have the ability to sit there and grade everything and give immediate feedback. But with our platform, you can allow students to choose. You could do the reading, the writing, the listening, or speaking. Pick one, whichever one you feel the strongest with, and they'll know, because guess what? They've been monitoring their own progress. So students is like, I do really well in listening. I'm going to do the listening one. Let them do that. Why not? Why not? Why not empower them to make them feel confident? Because again, confidence is key to learning another language. So why not give them that confidence and say, yeah, you can do a listening, and you could do a writing, and you could do a speaking, and you could do a reading. Boom, voila. And you have them being able to feel empowered in their classroom. And they'll pick the one that they know that they're doing well in. I would, not for nothing. Like if I'm really good at writing, so that would be the one that I would pick. So
I think you're great at speaking too. That's why we chose you for this wonderful interview, because you have such great input.
yeah.
No, seriously though. I think this is so valuable for teachers to hear from your perspective as a teacher, as an administrator, somebody that left the classroom and that left administration to come on board with Robotel and be like, this is something I so much believe in. I want to educate others about this. I want to make sure that teachers know about this, that they know how to use it, that they know how to leverage it. And not only help the teachers, but also the students learn differently in a better way. And so, lastly, I think what a lot of teachers now struggle with is how can you leverage smart class during in-person instruction? Like, we're not in this pandemic world anymore, there isn't as much virtual teaching anymore, so why still use technology for a lot of things when we're back in the classroom?
So students all have these great devices, so we have to use them, right? We should use them, but it's not the end all be all. So how would I use this during in-person instruction? Like I would launch this as an anticipatory set while I'm taking attendance, taking a look at homework from last night, dealing with all the kids coming in. Miss Bland, I got to go here, I got to go there. I was late to this, I was at the nurse, whatever, what have you. The mayhem of the bell ringing and the students coming in when you're in the secondary world. So it's a nice, like, let me just launch this activity to them. They're going to complete it. It's going to be automatically graded and inform the rest of my day's instruction for that lesson. Or during the middle of the lesson, I'm teaching a new topic, or it's the second day of teaching the pluperfect subjunctive, which is a very complex topic or structure, or I'm teaching, adverbial clauses in the subjunctive, or maybe I'm just teaching the simple present tense to my Spanish ones or my French one, or my English language learners. I might be teaching them phrasal verbs, which is a killer for ELLs, right? So in the middle of the lesson, I want to stop and check for understanding and do that formative assessment. They'll ask you, how do you formatively assess students? How do you know students are engaged in your lesson during your lesson? So stop, have them open up their Chromebook super quick, boom, boom, boom. You have a timed activity for 3 to 4 minutes at most. They complete it and you check for understanding. And again, it's more than just a kid going thumbs up, thumbs down, which is a great way. Not for nothing, but not for nothing. We know some kids are like, they're just doing it, just to do it, just to put something up, right? Whereas this, they actually have to go in for themselves and show you, right? So, thumbs up, thumbs down is great. However, we know some kids just sort of lag off of people's coattails and just do it just to do it. So this would actually give you a true barometer of what's going on in the middle of the classroom. And finally, if I was using it towards the end of my lesson, I would use it as that exit ticket, that closure, because you want students to close off the lesson. So how would I have them close it off? Maybe them speaking, doing a speaking activity and recording themselves, doing a pronunciation activity, or doing an activity that I would later go back and grade that might need my grading on there. So I could see, did they achieve my instructional objective for the day? Did they understand what it is that I wanted them to acquire during that lesson? So again, I would use it as an anticipatory set in the way beginning while there's the mayhem of the changing of the classes. I would use it in the middle of the lesson to check for understanding, for that formative assessment, to just see, like, are the kids getting what I'm teaching? Do I need to do some reteaching? Did I totally miss the mark? Are they snoozing on me? Like, what's going on? And finally, I would use it at the end of the lesson as an exit ticket, or that ticket out the door, for that they close the lesson and they show me, did they actually achieve what I intended to put forth in my instructional objective? Obviously, too, for homework, for reinforcing in the home, stuff that they can complete at home. And it was cute because my English language learners, this happened a lot when they were doing the pronunciation activities. I could hear the parents in the background actually getting in on the pronunciation activities. So it was adorable. And it's nice to have them get that immediate feedback when they're not with you, so that they could see that they're doing well, or maybe they need a little bit more support when they come back to the classroom. So again, this is a great tool for them to use outside of the classroom, at home, on the weekends. And for my ELLs, I did extend the summer program because it is a 12-month subscription for all of the students who get the platform. I did have summer modules for the students, so that those students that wanted to enrich their world language studies over the summertime. We know our AP students have to have their AP assignments on some sort of platform that could really give them automatic feedback, which is nice. And the teacher can be monitoring that, so they don't have all these major projects to grade day one in September when the students come and hand everything in. And so you could really mitigate that summer slide for language learning, because once they go home, they're no longer hearing German, they're no longer hearing French, they're no longer hearing Spanish, they're no longer hearing English sometimes, and so to allow that practice and to avoid the summer slide of their learning where you leave them in June, you could have them doing some activities over the summer times. It's really cool.
Candice, thank you so, so much. Honestly, I kind of want to, like, you almost inspire me to go back to like teaching with SmartClass and just go back and do this again. And I really hope that our viewers, our followers have been inspired by this as well, your experience. And I know you are always there for anybody that has any further questions. So I'm just going to throw it out there. Anybody, if you want to find out more, please feel free to go to our website, robotel.com, check out our blog, our YouTube channel. And you can always email Candice, you can email myself, or you can send a general email to info@robotel.com, and they'll connect you with somebody that can answer any and all of your questions, or connect you with anybody that could help you, get to that next step of actually using SmartClass in your classroom. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to talk about the Robotel Smart Class. It's an amazing, amazing tool for teachers.